Our next session is from Kevin Yee, who's the director of the Faculty Center for Teaching and Learning at the University of Central Florida, right here in Orlando. And the title is Creating and Sustaining AI Initiatives on Your Campus.
Thank you, Hans. There we are. Yeah, I realize now, standing here in front of you, that I could not have chosen a more boring title. So I apologize for that. I think now I would probably say something more like about affordability or doing it on a shoestring budget, because that's really the direction I'm going to go here. It's always possible to throw lots of money at a particular problem and get lots of answers, but that's not going to work for a lot of us. So yeah, as Hans mentioned, I am the director of our teaching center, Faculty Center for Teaching and Learning. And I've been doing that work of educational development since 2004. And then I'm also the, quote, AI czar on campus for us. And I've only been doing that since 2024. So that's going to come back, though, that those two worlds sort of intentionally collide. So over the years, I've been watching the headlines as various universities have announced their AI initiatives. And the ones that are flashiest, the ones that get the headlines are the ones that I've put onto the screen here. I've arranged it a little bit, I believe that's chronological. The University of Florida was ahead of the curve. It's very hard to be a neighbor of the University of Florida and try to compete because they were such an early head start. And they've been very gracious, actually, about sharing their methods. But you could see that there are some substantial differences, actually, between these big initiatives. So the University of Florida began with AI across the curriculum. If you were here in the last hour, you heard that was due to their QEP. So that they were early out of the gate there. And the Hypergator, if you've not met it before, is their AI tool, basically. It's their node, where they've got a lot of computing power. Which is a wonderful, marvelous thing. Auburn University worked a little bit differently, right? They started with research in mind first, and then they started training. Have any of you taken the Auburn University AI training? So yeah, they sell it sort of to the public. And when I got a new provost after getting the AI hat, he said, "Why don't you sell training to the public?" I said, "Well, Auburn's already got it. Like, they've got a lock on this." So that's one thing you could all look into if you're looking for sending your own faculty to something relatively inexpensive. UVA, speaking of expense, has trained a large number of faculty. If I'm doing my math right, they spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on putting faculty through renovations or course redesigns. So this was really a Cadillac approach that UVA took. University of Arizona has more recently developed a Chief AI and Data Science Officer. It's a much better title than my Special Assistant to the Provost for Artificial Intelligence, or Chief AI Officer. They've got a roadmap. They've got a bachelor's. There are many other places actually coming up with bachelor's as well as their solution. And then the Ohio State University more recently has sort of made a pledge that students will graduate with AI fluency, right? That all of them will have undergone not just one, but many classes throughout their, especially a general education program. So in trying to find some similarities between these sort of headline national examples, I came up with these 3 bullets. So starting from the middle, that there's strong central coordination. It's not being done ground up. It's not being done sort of by one department. It's, well, it is one department, but it's centrally determined. And it's campus-wide, right? That's a commonality for all of them. And many of them, not all of them, have taken the approach that they were going to use support, stipends for faculty to engage in the work of course redesign. If you were here last hour, we were talking as well about redesigning assessments. And that takes faculty effort. And so a common approach is to use stipends for that. There are some differences. We talked a little bit already about Auburn focusing on the research first, and Florida focusing on speed. They really have been first to market in terms of getting not just the curriculum in place, but also getting the access to the computing into the hands of their faculty and to their staff. And it's starting to give rewards in the sense of people building custom workflows and so forth because they have that, that infrastructure. Virginia, we talked about with the faculty-centered method of changing around the environment, changing around the, you know, what people think and believe about AI. Arizona, centralized leadership, kind of a middle-of-the-road approach, and then Ohio, we did already talk about. So we don't have that kind of money at UCF, nor do we have actually much of a culture of giving stipends to faculty for doing other things. So we took a different approach right from the very beginning, that we were going to try to be useful to the faculty, to provide tools and resources that they could use either through workshops that they come to us or at their department meetings. That's actually been key, I think, is that as a director of the teaching center, I get to sit in on the monthly meeting of the department chairs, and on multiple occasions I've had the opportunity to say, have us come out, let us come talk to your faculty about AI, this thing that's new. And that started early in 2023, and something like 32 out of the 45 departments have had us come visit to just talk through what is this, what's good about AI, what's dangerous about AI, all sorts of things. So that's really helped. So as it turns out, we do have a central coordination in the form of myself and a few others in an AI initiative I'll talk to you about in a second, but we're not doing it with stipends. We actually began in December of 2022, it was December 19, I remember the day, because I was on Christmas break, and I'd been seeing headlines in CNN for a couple of weeks now about artificial intelligence, which confused me, because AI is not new. It was not new even in 2022. And then I finally clicked on the CNN story in December 19th, and I realized my vacation is over. I'm going to have to build a website before we come back to campus in January so that our faculty understand there's this new threat, really. That's what most faculty's mind went to in 2023. But then also opportunities. So we did build that webpage. I'll show it to you in a second. And it was met with kind of a mixed reception. But, and I know I'm jumping a little bit ahead yet to talk about, you know, what our focus is going to be as an institution, but we were not focusing on the research primarily. We were not focusing on workflows that are going to save the staff time and money, although some of that is starting to happen now. Primarily focused on student AI fluency with the tools as they exist off the shelf. By which I mean, so far, large language models. Although, of course, if you're here, you've been paying attention, and you know that the AI landscape continues to shift. So we'll talk about that by the time we get to the end. So that's that web page we built. I've since changed it so many times I had to go to archive.org to get the original version. This is what we built in December 19th onwards. And you'll notice that I started with how to negate or neutralize the software. I called it software. It was 2022. And we had a list of, I don't know, 15 or so suggestions for what they could do to make it difficult for the students to use AI. And then there was a section below that about leaning in. Well, somebody took a screen cap of our webpage and in their department meeting put it up on screen and said out loud, this is the wrong response, this neutralizing thing. And so what we realized almost right from the start was that in the teaching center, there's no winning. Like, there are going to be some faculty who really want to lean into this thing, and they're going to, and won't brook any other argument. And then there can be other faculty who really don't want to hear about this new AI thing at all, and they just, you know, I mentioned I went to 35 different departments. In almost every one of those department meetings, at least one person in the background or in the audience said, I'm so glad I'm retiring. So there are definitely Professor McPatches in every department who just wanted to, you know, teach the way they've always taught. And so we, you know, as a teaching center, you do have to meet the faculty where they are. That doesn't mean, we chose to make that not mean just being an AI cheerleader, because that would chase some of the faculty away. So, okay, now more to the institutional story. Our provost convened almost right away in 2023 a task force. This is nothing revolutionary. Many of your institutions have done the same thing. have a task force that comes up with some recommendations. The top recommendation that the task force came up with was to hire a central AI coordinator, AI kind of point person. Part of what we were mimicking there was what had happened a few miles north of us in Gainesville. Before Hans, there was a different person in that role, but there was already an AI point person. I am aware that it was very self-serving, that I was both chair of that task force and now the AI coordinator that got hired as a result of that task force. So I don't know that you can all swing that yourself necessarily. But so the other suggestions were all things that we've acted on in the meantime. So in addition to wearing the second hat, I got some amount of resources to bring some other people along. They were going to they basically get paid out of the initiative to help with training, doing workshops for both students and staff, and of course the faculty ones continued. A website that had a lot of, and I'm going to focus on that in a second, a lot of our resources just available when they wanted to go see it. Trainings, both live, but also recorded, and they can watch it when they want. Bigger campus events, any of you do like an AI day on your campus? A few, okay. So that was what we had in mind, was that we wanted to try different things and facing different audiences. There we were actually borrowing from Auburn, who had the first AI day that I was aware of, and I really liked their approach, which was to bring hiring officials, employers, basically. So, oh, Awesome is in the back of the room. I didn't even see that. So hopefully I paraphrased Auburn's approach to AI Day correctly there, Awesome. War Eagle, okay. And then number 5, widely involved faculty and staff on the decision making. So I'm going to show you a capture of the website in a second, but we wanted to avoid this being sort of the Kevin show. I wanted to get lots of people's input on what should we be doing, partly because that's where ownership comes from, of course, when they help build it. But also, we were aware from the beginning that we need other people's ideas. So this is on the bottom left is a little capture of part of what's on the website. The thing that gets hit the most there is under resources, the top thing is AI tools. It's a stoplight system. Here are all the things that you can use that IT says is okay. Here are all the things that you can use, but like IT doesn't approve of this, nor does it ban it. So most of the large language models fall into that yellow zone of you can use it, but be careful. And then there's some things in the light red and then the true red zones down below that either been banned by IT or banned by the state of Florida. DeepSeek, for instance, is banned by the state of Florida. And then all of the agentic AI stuff is really in that zone as well. We're taking a very cautious approach, encouraging faculty and staff and students to be very careful about using agents. So this is a sort of a roadmap. Or I guess a roadmap of what's on that website. So it's the same categories. And the ones in blue are where I worked with our IT department to find out, I wanted their language. I wanted to know what are the things that you want to say about data privacy or data security. So because I don't know that people go to IT's website much for this, and AI was still a relatively recent thing. All the items in red are ways in which we try to involve the rest of the community. So the number 5, the community of practice. We meet once a month. We talk about what's new at UCF when it comes to the AI tools or just whatever news we have about AI. Then we talk about model and tool updates in AI since the past month. There is always a lot to talk about there. And then we link to various news stories and studies that have come out since the last time we've met. And so 200 some people out of our faculty and a few staff have signed up to receive those community of practice invitations. They don't all come. It's usually more like 40 or 60 on a given time. But it's actually a really useful way to know what people are thinking. It's a crowdsourcing attempt. Right? And so after those community of practices, that's when I finalize the newsletter that then goes out to the one liaison per department, right? So a faculty person who sort of is receiving the newsletter that is really the same stuff. What's changed at UCF, what's changed with the models, what are the new studies, and they distribute it to their department. The thinking there was that if I sent out an email from Kevin Yee in the Teaching Center, a lot of faculty don't know who I am, they won't open it. But they all know their department colleague that has signed up to be the recipient of that, and then we'll send it back out. There's a governance council as well as, there's also an advisory board that didn't sort of make it on here. So then this is kind of key for our approach here. It took us a little while to realize this is what we wanted to say about AI. That we didn't want to just be AI cheerleaders. So the left side of this chart is the leaning into AI side of things, right? We have to teach AI fluency, and we can't just assume that students will get there. It's all of us. We all have to take responsibility and ownership to give students AI fluency. At the same time, the employers are looking for co-creation, the bottom left, right? At some point in the student's career, we should be telling them what that looks like in our exact discipline. What does co-creation look like? You're going to need to do it as soon as you graduate, so they need practice doing that as well. But if we did nothing for all 4 years except lean in and do AI fluency and do co-creation from the very beginning, again, teaching center guy, right? I'm a little worried that they're not going to learn the foundational things, the fundamentals in that discipline. If they're using AI to create things from the very beginning instead of learning things without AI, then the phrase I usually use here is this 2006 movie, Idiocracy. I still haven't seen the movie, but you can always tell in the audience who's seen the movie because they just start snickering. So in an effort to prevent idiocracy, I think we need the right side of the pie chart as well. I think we need to convince students that used to say writing, but it now means learning without AI, convince them that the AI shortcuts are not in their best interest sometimes. And there are times where we need to change around our assessments so that it's hard for AI to just snap its fingers and deliver that output. So it's stuff you would have thought of, right? So switching to oral examinations is sort of a replacement for writing an essay, or blue book exams. Some people are talking about, ways that AI cannot, match that deliverable. But friction also could apply to the way the assignment itself works. So instead of saying, write an essay about Hamlet's relationship with his parents, the prompt should be something more like, go read and view the lecture in Module 4, and then apply those principles to the student discussion board answers in Module number 5. Because ChatGPT doesn't know what's in Module 4 or in Module 5, right? And so lots of little things like that with AI friction. So what's fortunate about this, and I guess it's probably was subconscious from the very beginning, is that this leaves room for faculty members who believe in AI and who believe that we should do education without reliance on AI, the cognitive offloading part that worries them. So I'm telling departments, this is worth a discussion now. Like, redo your curriculum, what it takes to get the degree in this field, where you're thinking about where are we going to do AI fluency education? Where are we going to do co-creation? It doesn't have to be near the end, but it kind of makes sense near the end, like a capstone experience. And then there are going to be disciplines, not all of them, that are going to feel like, all right, most of the 4 years then are over on this side, where we're not making it easy for them to use AI. So I recognize this is kind of an unusual position for the AI czar on campus to have, that sometimes we don't want AI, but it matches what the faculty, some faculty, are looking for, and it's the only way to truly make me happy wearing both hats at the same time, teaching and learning and AI. Because if we just push AI without them learning the fundamentals, I don't know. I don't think that's going to work out for us. So we wrote a couple of resources. This is the one that we wrote for AI fluency, where we're just trying to give faculty ideas on ways to create discussion board assignments that sort of have students live out and experience what AI can do or not do. So just to give you a quick example of one of the ones that's in there, is telling students to generate an annotated bibliography from ChatGPT, and then start a discussion board post where they paste that. But then before they click submit, they also go to the library website and evaluate, is that first source real or hallucinated? Second source, real or hallucinated? And the students actually find a lot of value in that because they don't directly otherwise have a lot of evidence about hallucinations. So that's really just a book giving different ideas about how to use, especially discussion boards, to teach AI fluency instead of it being a lecture. We also wrote this, a second resource. This is all about convincing students not to take the AI shortcuts. So some of you will have heard this metaphor by now, and we use it here in this book too. But we need ways to tell students that using AI to write their Hamlet essay is like lifting weights with a forklift in the gym, right? So the weights are getting lifted, the Hamlet essay is being written, but you're not getting any struggle. You're not getting any productive struggle. And then struggle is actually the point. It's how you build muscle in the gym. And the same thing with the brain. So this is several dozen ways you could move things around within your class, small changes that will hopefully, over the entirety of it, convince students that these AI shortcuts are not in their best interest. And we recognized that we needed to crowdsource our ideas. It wasn't enough that those of us in the teaching center would come up with all the answers. So we have been organizing since 2023 a sharing conference that is really not about research. This is just frontline faculty telling other frontline faculty, here's what I'm doing in my class. Here's the way I'm meeting this particular challenge or threat. And we don't require that it be AI positive. Sometimes people go there and talk about leading out of AI. So there's that's coming in June, up the road actually at the Gaylord Palms Hotel, not too far from here. So these are challenges that we're still working on. We've gotten to a point where the fluency, I think, is getting there. The student fluency has been the hardest nut to crack. We're mostly working through the faculty to train the students rather than trying to train the students directly. UCF has like 60,000 undergraduates, so it's daunting to imagine doing a lot of direct student work. But the three things that we're working on now, we're trying to get more tools in the hands of our faculty. So as they do research, as they start to build their own agents and workflows and solutions, we need our own research layer. And so don't ask me in follow-up questions to explain it technically because I don't know the answer, but it involves Azure. And then it's actually what Navigator does at UF as well. The various tools live on the Azure layer, and then they're controlled locally so that you know how much token use is being done per user, and you can sort of cut it off without making it super expensive per day. So that would get us more walled garden AI tools than just the Copilot, the one that we have now. We're working on wearables and we're working on agents, both of which are shifting that landscape of what the fluency is that faculty and the students need to have. We have started reaching out to other campuses. I've reached out to other campuses. There are several in the state of Florida where there's an AI coordinator, and we just have a monthly meeting to talk about, what are you doing now? So Hans is part of that, and he's part of these meetings that we all come to when we can. There's even a Florida a sort of interest group called Falcon, which has to do with AI. Florida Falcon, it's flfalcon.org. I don't have a slide for it, but that also sort of meets monthly, and that's not just coordinators. That's anyone interested in higher education in the state of Florida. So if you're in the state of Florida and this interests you and you want to come to a monthly meeting, email me. There's my slide at the end. Will have my email address, or look up Florida Falcon. If you're from out of state, I would look, if you don't already have one, I would look to create one of those. I found that really valuable, actually, to connect with others. Again, with the idea of crowdsourcing the things that we can. Okay, so as I mentioned, there's the email address, and you can, with that QR code, get all the slides such as they are that have been there. It was not even a student audience, it was a faculty audience about 6 months ago And a moment just like this slide was up here on screen, somebody raised their hands and said, "What is that picture on screen there?" I felt really old. Okay, I have time for questions if anybody wants to ask. One thing I guess I was in the background of what I was trying to say there is that if you're not directly working in a teaching center, I would urge you to get involved with the teaching center. Ask the teaching center to do a lot of this work, because they should, in theory, be very eager to do things. There's a question over that way. Yeah.
So you shared some of the steps you guys took in UCF. So what was the most impactful, actually, step that really built the sustainability you were mentioning earlier for cost and so on?
So honestly, I think the offer to visit the department meetings as they normally meet has been the most impactful, because that has gotten us in front of almost every faculty member. It has whetted the appetite for the other programming that we do. So some of the programming that we do around AI actually comes out of our teaching center as opposed to out of our AI fluency efforts. And so some of you were in the room last hour. You heard examples of sort of one-off workshops and then an entire workshop series. So we have like a 10-week course. They don't get a stipend for it. In fact, sign up for 2 hours a week just to take that deep dive. But a lot of people we get like 50 people every semester doing that, because of those department meetings. That's where they've learned that there's a whole world here that they did not know about, that the headlines of whatever they're reading about ChatGPT is insufficient to know what to do about it at the college level. So that, I think, makes the most difference, is being willing to go out into the departments. There's a question back here. Yeah. Okay.
Sorry, whoever I stole the question from, but my question is, what has brought you the most engagement, not just from faculty, but also from students?
Students are actually a nut that we haven't fully cracked yet, actually, because part of the problem is that we wanted to offer sort of, so there is an onboarding course that the students take, but it's a pretty shallow look at AI. And so we want to give more webinars to students, but reaching them has been our problem. So I don't know what it's like on your campus, but we don't have a way to email students, actually. So we tried our best to work through the faculty and told them to invite their students. We got our Zoom webinar ready to go to hold up to 600 people. 6 students came to that one. So that's a reaction to the last part of your question. The most engagement, what has created the most engagement? That would probably be that multi-week deep dive that we do, the 10-week deep dive, because the people who come to that they end up really motivated to learn other things. We had a College of Business professor over this last Christmas break wanting to build agents, so he taught himself Python and GitHub and all the things he needed to do. None of that was in his background before, but he had gone through that 10-week program, and we don't go into that in the 10-week program, because it's more about the off-the-shelf tools instead of building your own thing, because as far as I can tell, you have to know Python to build your own thing at this point. Some of you are shaking your heads, and I've seen some example of vibe coding recently that works. I've asked one of them to build me an Atari 2600 type game, which it did, and it was playable right from the beginning without needing to code, but I don't know. I think it's still not fully baked in yet, but I'm going to that person had the other question. Probably be your last question.
I was just wondering about how you sustain interest in AI amongst your staff and some of the faculty, because we're 3 years in, and so the ones who are interested have sort of come, and how are you kind of sustaining that work?
So that's a good question. So when I mentioned that there's a little bit of money centrally for this effort, part of it includes some administrative stipend, basically, for the people who do work in the teaching center with me. They now have to spend a few hours a week on AI. Part of what I've done to, both for cross-training purposes and for sustainability of their interest, is they cycle through things. So that 10-week deep dive course started with one person. She did it for all of 2023. The second person did it for all of 2024. And the third one did it for all of 2025. So that gives them a little bit of a break, I think, in doing that. But it is a little exhausting, actually, to try to track what's going on in the AI world month to month. And a lot of that happens just by me taking good notes on what I'm seeing on LinkedIn. I basically turned my LinkedIn into just AI stuff. I'm only following the people who are AI interested and have AI updates. So that's one of the ways I stay current.
All right, we're at time, so please help me thank the speaker.